This is the story of the rise and fall of children's outdoor games in 20th century Britain. It's a journey into a secret world of adventure and imagination that blossomed in the nation's streets, back alleys and playgrounds. Playing on the streets was the defining feature of a working class childhood. But the freedom they enjoyed meant they often got into trouble, none more so than the tribal gangs of boys who named themselves after the places where they lived.
We are the King's Cross boys. We know our manners. We spend our tanners. We are respected wherever we go. I tiddly I eat brown bread. Ever seen a donkey fall down dead? We are the King's Cross boys.
When I call your birthday, please jump in. January, February, March, April, May, June, July.
Children enjoyed a huge repertoire of games and songs, all still fondly remembered today.
I'm looking for my Ogo Pogo, my funny little Ogo Pogo. His mother was an earwig, his father was a whale. Let's put a little bit of salt on his tail. Oh, soppy songs.
This is the story of a lost world of outdoor children's play that survived into the 1950s before changing forever. A 100 years ago, folklorists began documenting the extraordinary kaleidoscope of children's games that flourished in the city streets. In working-class London, they collected more than 1,000 different children's games, from street football to leapfrog. But what struck them most of all was their spirit of defiance, expressed most vividly in their songs.
There was quite a big repertoire of street songs that all kids knew, that they learnt from other kids. They weren't nursery rhymes, they weren't the sort of songs you learned at school, although some of them were parodies of things you learnt at school.
As a child in the 1920s, Charles Chilton sang these songs and later collected them as a folklorist and writer. He was one of that generation of school children who celebrated Empire Day every 24th of May, for which they were taught patriotic hymns designed to instill national pride and duty.
I want to tell you, children, that you are, each one of you, a member of the Empire. And when you sing that you're proud of the Empire, I want you to feel that you're proud of yourselves.
But the stark contrast between the rhetoric of empire and the poverty of much working-class life was not lost on children like Charles. This is what they sang.
Land of soap and water, mother, wash my feet. Father, pick my toenails whilst I eat my meat. We were supposed to be very proud of the fact that Britain had the largest empire in the world. Most of us, of course, had no soles to our shoes, and some of us didn't have shirt to our backs, but we were very proud of being British.
However, there were some customs where poor children were truly grateful for the gifts they received. On high days and holidays, there was often fun and games on the streets as children scrambled for food and money ritually dispensed to them by the better off. In the Norfolk village of Chedworth, children eagerly look forward to the 14th of February. St. Valentine's Day was the best day of the year for Ed Mitchell.
We'd congregate down the bottom of our road and we'd go to where the posh people lived and we'd sing, "Oh, Mother Valentine, draw up your window blind, you be the giver, I'll be the taker." And then we'd jab it up and jab it up. "Oh, Mother Valentine, draw up your window blind, you be the giver, I'll be the taker." Quicker and quicker and quicker. And then they would heat up halfpennies on a shovel over a coal fire and throw them all in the road, and us kids would scramble for them because they were red hot, and as soon as you put them on your hands and your fingers, they burnt your fingers, so you had to drop them, and that caused a big laugh. Then we'd go down the road and go to the shops and sing it outside the shops, Old Mother Valentine. And then out of the shop would come old Arborn, the shopkeeper, and chuck any old sweets he had all left over from Christmas, and we'd be scrapping about on the floor for these, and that was a very big day in our lives, more important than Christmas, because we were getting something for nothing, you see.
Another popular custom in the children's calendar was bonfire night on the 5th of November, when almost every street ritually burned an effigy of Guy Fawkes. This fascination with bogeymen and folk devils ran deep and surfaced in children's games throughout the year. John Salinas grew up in Liverpool in the 1920s and 30s.
There was one game that we played, Old Witch, what are you looking for? One of us would bend over like an old woman, and then the rest of us would group round while she hobbled along, and we would say, Old Witch, what are you looking for? And she'd say, pins and needles. Old Witch, what are the pins and needles for? To sew buttons on clothes. Now, everybody knew what was coming next, and the fear was anticipated. And they'd say, Old Witch, what are you looking for? She'd say, knives and forks. Old Witch, what are the knives and forks for? And at this, she would straighten up, fling her arms wide, and shout, to eat little boys and girls like you, by which time everybody had scattered.
The street was a fairly safe place where children could act out their fears and fantasies, free from adult control. Mothers and neighbours often kept a watchful eye on the young ones, but it was the children who decided what they wanted to play. For girls, skipping was a perennial favourite, and in London's East End, girls like Joan Risley had a large repertoire of skipping games.
That was one of our everyday games. Couldn't go out without a skipping rope, or you always tried to find somebody who had a skipping rope. Sometimes it was a crowd of us, sometimes we skipped on our own, and we used to sing a little song to it. Somebody under the bed, I don't know who it is, I feel so shocking frightened, I call Marjorie in. Marjorie lights the candle, Marjorie lights the gas. Run out, there's somebody under the bed.
But children's play wasn't always as good-natured as this. Some boys and girls were routinely left out and picked on for being different. Any sign of weakness or inferiority might be cruelly seized upon. Eileen Cook remembers how one boy's life was made a misery in the Lancashire mill town of Colne in the 1930s.
One of the lads suddenly had to start wearing glasses, and they were little tin-rimmed things. They were only not much bigger than a shilling. Well, we were fascinated with them. It used to be, who can smash his glasses, or let's try them on. We used to take them off him and twist the thing that went round his ear and break them. Well, his mother stopped him playing out with him in the end because she were having to keep going back to clinic for fresh glasses, because as soon as he came out with, we'll all have a try at them, twisting them all round and Alice breaking his blooming glasses.
The children played mostly with other children who lived in their street. This was their territory, and there was a pecking order based on age and strength. Though any footballing prowess always helped boost a boy's popularity. Despite the fact that every game had its own rules, foul play meant it could soon all end in tears. Boys quickly settled most disputes by fighting, but long-running rivalries between gangs from neighbouring areas could flare up at any time. Children always had to be prepared for a surprise visit from their street-fighting, poorer neighbours.
We were pretty low down where we were, but there were children that didn't wear boots or shoes around in bare feet, and we used to call them buckos. And if we saw a crowd of buckos coming towards us, we'd take a quick side turning, turn left to get out the way.
But John Street had their tried and tested methods to fend off the intruders.
One of our secret weapons. In the street there were two deaf and dumb boys, and one of them, they didn't play with us very much. But when we were attacked by another gang, or threatened, attacked is a strong word, when we were threatened, someone would say, "Get the dummy." Oh, get the dummy, how cruel, but get the dummy. And out would come the dummy, and he was twice our size, and he made these awful noises. And as soon as they saw the dummy, and the dummy made his noises and waved his arms, they were away.
You never was pretty, was you? Really, Dad, come on here? Come on there, dear. Come on. You're right, mate. And no matter, you never was pretty, was you? Come here, you. What's the matter with you? I don't want my face. Well, you got to have it, Dad. What's the matter with you?
Every street had its own leader of the pack, and although the adults tried to stop bullying and antisocial behaviour, it often flared up. Donald Bailey grew up in Birmingham in the 30s.
No other kid was going to push me about. If I wanted something and there was no adult there to secure it for somebody else, then I would take it, I would have it. Even though it meant, you'd have to fight for it. And then, of course, once you establish yourself as the one who will use his fists, most of the kids won't even face up to you. In our street, in Copy Street, nobody ever came to me and really, really opposed me. I think you get a reputation. Kids talk as much as anyone else, and you don't mess with him type of thing.
In the leafy suburbs, middle-class families enjoyed a much more private, genteel lifestyle. They wanted to protect their sons and daughters from the bad influence of rough children who played on the streets. Educational and improving home-based play was strongly encouraged by parents who had more time and money to spend on their children's personal development. For them, the back garden was the best playground for their children, a place where they could safely let off steam. To play in the street was common and strictly out of bounds for grammar school boys like Warwick Taylor.
In those days, there were a lot of rules of play. You weren't allowed to go and play around in the street. That was really taboo, especially not on Sunday. I think it was a snobbish thing amongst neighbours. My child doesn't go play it in the street, neither does mine, and so on. I mean, it was silly really, because there were two boys lived next door to me, and we used to sort of shout to each other over the fence, but you mustn't go outside to the front at all.
The imagination of middle-class children was captured by the fast-growing toy industry, which created games to be bought by parents as birthday and Christmas presents. Most popular of all was the Hornby Dublo train set, the dream of a generation of schoolboys whose biggest fantasy was to run Britain's railways.
Each year I'd get something to add to this. Some points, crossovers, more track, a railway station, a signal box, trucks, carriages, and gradually it built up. All this represented to me was a really live running railway. So I'd have imaginary timetables and imaginary destinations. My station wasn't really a mainline station, it was what we call a through station, en route somewhere. So I used to watch the clock and say, right, that'll be the 9:30, going to Wigan or somewhere, or Liverpool. It was a fantasy world, it really was. It was absolutely wonderful. I loved it.
The toys bought for working-class children, mostly at Christmas, were much more modest. They were purchased on the street and often played with on the street too. But these toys didn't always bring the happiness that they promised. In an atmosphere of scarcity, they could fuel bitter rivalries between siblings who didn't want the toy they'd been given. On Christmas Day, 1938, there was only one present Donald Bailey really wanted from his mum and dad: a toy penknife.
Jeff, who was 4 years older than me, was given this lovely penknife. So I wanted a penknife. And they said, there's your ball. And I said, I don't want a ball, I want a penknife. But you've got to have a ball. I says, you can keep your bloody ball, and threw it back at them. And that's how I felt that I was not being treated the same as Jeff. Although I was 4 years younger, I couldn't see that there was any difference between me and Jeff.
The present to die for was a new bike. They were rarely seen in working-class neighbourhoods, and if one was bought, it was usually given to the eldest boy and would then be passed on down through the family. But this wasn't going to stop Eileen Cook from getting the birthday present of her dreams.
I wanted a bike, and it's coming up to my birthday. And I minded about suggesting, you see, about this bike. My dad wouldn't buy it. So we were having a meal one day, and my mother had put it on the table, and I said, can I have a bike? And my dad says, don't mention that bike again, you're not having one. I said, well, I won't eat another thing, I'll starve to death till I get a bike. So he said, right, leave the table, go in the living room, that's the end of the story. I thought, I'll be dead before they've finished the dinner. This can't happen. He'll give way. But he didn't. No, he didn't.
Eileen then decided to take the matter into her own hands. She collected the bike she wanted from the owner of the local bike shop, a close friend of her father, on the grounds that he'd agreed to the sale and would settle up on Friday.
I took the bike, rode round on it. All my friends, we all rode all over, we had it all night. Then I said to my friend, my dad said, you have a shed where your dad keeps his bike. Can I put ours in because we haven't got a shed? And she said, yeah, you're all right.
However, by Friday evening, Eileen knew her game would be up.
My dad came home, he went ballistic, but the man wouldn't take it back because we'd been playing out on it all week and he couldn't pay it back, so my dad had to pay for it.
Country children had few toys or presents, but they at least had the vast adventure playground that nature provided on their doorstep. Birds nesting was popular with many school children, but it inevitably brought them into conflict with authority.
Because every boy in them days out in the country had a collection of birds' eggs in a box, and we used to go around birds nesting, thrushes, blackbirds, hedge sparrows, spinks, yellowhammers, and all that sort of thing, you see. But we wouldn't take more than one egg out of a nest, because that bird wouldn't come back and lay another one if you took the lot out. All us boys had caps in them days, pink caps, and we used to get the eggs before they were blown and put them behind our cap, you see, to carry them there. They were safe there. But if we were caught by old Amos coming back from the common or from the riverbank, he was the gamekeeper, he'd know we'd been bird nesting and he'd come along and he said, hello, where you all been? We'd say, we've been for a walk down the common, Mr. Amos. Oh, hey, he said, well, come here then, you see. And he'd smack our caps on the top like this, and if we got any birds' heads in there, all the shell and the yolk would all run down her face. And he said, right, go on. He said, I know where you've been now, don't I?
Also growing up close to the countryside in hundreds of private boarding and public schools were the children of well-to-do middle and upper-class parents. Their schools, mostly built in Victorian and Edwardian times, were often set in a semi-rural idyll. Here they could learn and play in a structured environment, far away from the temptations of the city and the corrupting influence of working-class children. But entering this closed world could be a shock for young boys leaving home for the first time. Like Alec Gunn, who at the age of 8 travelled to Oxford with his mother to begin his first term at the Dragon School.
On the day I left the Dragon School, we went to Paddington, across the train to Oxford. My mother came with me. And we got to the school and we had tea with Mrs. Lynham, who was the headmaster's wife. And then I was sort of handed over. And my mother was near tears, and I was near tears, and I had this little rubber duck, which my mother gave me. And clutching this, I arrived in the dormitory on my first night. And a kindly boy, who was a year senior to me, came up and said, put that away.
You'll have an awful time if anyone discovers you with that. So I did. It was very good advice.
Alec was lucky. In an era when many public schools were obsessed with physical contact sports, he'd landed in a place with a much more enlightened attitude to healthy exercise and outdoor games.
The ethos at the Dragon School in sport was mainly fitness. It wasn't so much toughening one up to be a leader of empire or anything like that. For instance, we were offered a reward if we bathed in the Cherwell every morning before breakfast, including Sundays. And you had to swim across the river and back every day of the autumn term. Think of adventure about it. And there's the competitive thing to think, you know, marking off the days, I've only got another week to do at the end of term, that sort of thing. And there was everybody clapping when the headmaster came round, dished out the half-crowns.
Working class children enjoyed outdoor swimming too, in the new Lidos or in the local streams and rivers. With no school teachers in charge and sometimes no costumes on, swimming for them involved much larking about. But the fun and games would often be brought to an abrupt end with the arrival of the bobby on his beat.
Around us, we had to swim in the River Chet. And of course we went in showcock, and we didn't have no clothes on, couldn't afford a costume until you got about 14. And old P.C. Hall, the village slop, he used to come down there and hide in the nettles, because the nettles grew about 5 foot high. And his job was to catch any boy over the age of about 13 or 14 swimming down there. And of course, if you were over 14, he'd book you, and you'd be up at Loddon Town Hall and either get fined £5 for that, or your father and mother would have to pay.
If there was one thing children did that was guaranteed to antagonise those in authority over them, it was to take their clothes off in public. But to be caught exposing your private parts in the school playground was to break every rule in the book, as 12-year-old Bolton boy Harry Dibner discovered to his cost in 1936.
You always knew the teachers were watching you from the classroom windows above, always. I once got a hell of a hammering. There were 6 of us and we were measuring our penises. And we didn't know. The headmaster was watching us. When we got back to the classroom, he said, Dibner, out. Ball, out. Car, out. Holding, out. We're all looking round. What's going on? Now, gentlemen, to all the classroom, these are the products of the English men who will hold our empire together. These are the men who is going to work and keep the families together. And do you know what I found them doing? No, sir. Measuring the penises. Well, the classroom erupted. And now he said, we'll see what kind of Englishmen they are. So he went to his cupboard when we knew what were coming. Now he said, gentlemen, one at a time, put your hands up. And when he brought that cane down, man, you went with that cane to the floor. And when you got up, you daren't whimper. There was a blue mark across your each hand.
In September 1939, the Second World War began, and it turned children's lives upside down. With impending German air attacks, the city streets where children had once played suddenly became the most dangerous place to be, and were emptied at the sound of every air raid siren. To begin with, the authorities predicted that poison gas would be dropped.
This hand rattle means gas. Put on your gas mask and keep it on.
44 million gas masks were issued to protect the lives of every man, woman and child. One of the children who wore them was Odette Buchanan from Harrow.
They were made of black rubber and you had to fix them over your face, and once they were on you'd got a piece of perspex for the eyes to see out, and then you'd got this funnel with the grid at the end of it that you breathed through, and it fixed over the back of your head with a strap, and it stuck onto your face, and the smell was absolutely disgusting. I still can't stand the smell of rubber. It just was totally revolting. And the thing was, we never used them.
There were no gas attacks, and to begin with, no bombing raids either. The war was seen by some children as a new adventure where even the gas mask could inspire new street games.
We discovered that they made brilliant weapons. So, you know, I was one part of a gang and the other gang had their weapons as well. And we used to charge, but our school was on a hill and we used to have to go downhill to get home. So you go hurtling down the hill, swinging these gas masks over your shoulder. And as you catch up with someone, whack!
Official films were insistent that everyone should carry their gas masks at all times. A message that was taken seriously by children far and wide, especially by Lancashire girl Eileen Cook.
We were all issued with gas masks, and they were in like a brown cardboard box with a string on, and you never went through the door without your gas mask. And at one time we had like little luggage labels with name and address on your coats. And because we were, you know, thought, well, there's going to be a bombing. We didn't know what the bombing were going to be, but it's going to happen now. We've got to be prepared for this, you see.
Attacks from the air are swift.
Everyone knew a gas mask was essential in an air raid.
So be quick in getting your masks and putting them on, but keep cool, and you will always be safe.
So when Eileen lost hers whilst playing, she panicked.
When I got home, lost my mask. Had our heaters, but I hadn't got mine. Oh my God. So my mother had to tramp back up, right up to the fields to look. We looked all over for this gas mask. Gone, lost. Oh my God. So we had to go down to ARP station to issue with another, and he gave me a right telling off. I was absolutely terrified of the guy telling me off. But had somebody notified Hitler? That was my main worry, because if he knew I'd lost my gas mask and he knew where I lived, would he going to send these gas bombs that I'd been training to put my gas mask on for? Oh, I were poorly. I felt sure somebody would have notified Hitler that I'd lost my gas mask.
If you have a child of school age and wish to have him evacuated, you should send him to school tomorrow, Friday, with hand luggage containing the child's gas mask, a change of underclothing, night clothes, shoes, spare stockings or socks, a toothbrush, a comb, a towel, soap, face cloth.
At the outset of war, around 2 million children from the big towns and cities were evacuated in voluntary schemes to the safety of the countryside, away from the predicted air attacks. Around half of all city children left on what seemed to be a great adventure. But many had never been away from home before, and the upheaval was greater than any had imagined. It was a lottery whether a child found a good home or not, and some were treated cruelly. However, for the lucky ones, this could be the beginning of a new life that extended their horizons forever, like Donald Bailey, the young bully from West Bromwich.
We looked around the house, and this house was different. This was what I would say now was a middle-class house. Very quiet, very sombre, very peaceful house. And she turned out to be the most wonderful, wonderful person. We became my boys. We were all my boys. Donald and Philip. Never called Don, never called him Phil. Donald and Philip.
The Blitz finally began in September 1940, bringing with it terror and heartbreak for the families who remained in London and big cities all over Britain. For almost 9 months, they were the targets for nightly bombing raids that would kill more than 60,000 civilians. Parents and their children took refuge in a variety of shelters. For David Bromwich from Plymouth, it was an Anderson shelter.
Things really started getting bad. The raid started about 5 o'clock in the evening. We had an Anderson shelter in our garden. So we stayed there and stayed there. And I think when the night time came, suddenly there was one hellish bang. We couldn't go out to look, but the house must have shifted from one side of the road to the other, more or less. And then a warden, area warden, come along and said, I'm afraid you left the move. You've got to go out because your house is gone. You could see from the front of the house right through to the very back.
David went to live with relatives nearby. The children in blitzed cities settled into a new daily routine that revolved around air raid shelters. They continued to entertain themselves inside, but with the next bombing raid never far away, it wasn't easy.
You were in there for 4 hours, 5 hours at times, because the raids were so big. And people were just getting, well, us boys were trying it at games, and they're of some sort, alleys, or read a little book, but you were too scared to do very much anyway as children.
However, even amongst the devastation of blitzed streets, the morning after a raid, the children could find adventure and excitement. One of the most popular boys' games was to search for shrapnel and bombshells.
When we came out of the shelters, us boys, out again, onto the streets, onto the bomb sites. We would go out, pick up bits of shell, bomb casings, everything like that, and then live incendiary bombs. Well, they were, you could barter with them very well indeed, you know, the big nice bomb with the fin and all on it, and the German Markings. We had so many at the time, we took them on, put them on the mantelshelf, one either side.
The true horror and tragedy of war was never far away for the children of the Blitz. It was brought home to David in the aftermath of the worst attack on Plymouth.
One particular bomb came down and killed I think it was five people, completely gone outright. The following morning, we boys, we scrabbled around the bomb site, looking for shrapnel and one thing and another. And on this particular, I'd moved a stone one side and there was a finger with a ring on it. And it just stunned us for a minute. Then it made me realise that it was friends and brothers of friends of mine who had been killed.
Meanwhile, many of the city children who'd been evacuated were beginning to discover the joys of the countryside.
Dear Mum and Dad, thank you so much for the postal order. This morning I went on a horse to Westwood Farm. The horse's name is Prince.
Dear Mum, I'm sorry for not writing.
We've got a wood, which was ours. You could go round the edges of the fields. There was a stream that ran through. You could drink out of this stream. The best we'd ever seen was Grist Green Recreation Ground, but there wasn't a tree on there. This had got, you got trees, you could climb the trees. In fact, one of the things we used to do, because there was a lot of young willows there, we'd climb up as high as we could until we couldn't climb any higher. Then we'd hang on, and the tree would bend slowly and lower us to the ground. Sometimes, if we were lucky, it would spring back up again, so we could use it again.
The evacuees quickly learned the games played by generations of country children, all of them geared to the opportunities provided by each changing season and by nature's bounty. One game was to pretend to be a poacher, as John Hooper, evacuated from Cardiff to mid-Wales, remembers.
The salmon came up to spawn, and we used to play poaching salmon. Because the river went right past the school, you see. And one of the boys would go up the stream about 50 yards or so, whatever, and chuck in lumps of wood about that long, about salmon-sized lumps of wood. And then as these little logs came down, we'd hook them out, you see, and that landed a salmon. Of course, inevitably, we got wet feet. And some of the bigger boys would occasionally be the water bailiffs. And if they caught us, naturally, we got pushed into the river. So we go back to afternoon school, soaking wet feet, freezing cold. But anyway, loved it.
We sent our children out into the country for their safety. And we found we'd given them more than safety. We'd given them a new world.
In 1945, the evacuees were enjoying their last summer in the countryside. By then, the experience had inspired the nation with a new vision of a better life for all its children. Donald Bailey had been changed forever.
I think I was a different person when I came home after evacuation. The aggression had gone. The absolute aggression that I'd had as a child had totally dissipated. And I think I was a more friendly person. The environment in which we lived clearly has a difference. I mean, there's no comparison between the green fields and the countryside to the back streets of West Bromwich.
But the cities to which the evacuees returned had been deeply scarred by the war. There were major social problems, one of which was an increase in troublesome behaviour amongst the children who'd remained behind in the blitzed cities. The disruption of family life took its toll. The soldiers who returned came home to cities that were often unrecognisable to those they'd left. It would take a long time to build the better future that they'd been fighting for. For their children, the disruption sometimes continued as countless families were forced to move around looking for new homes. All too easy friends could end up an outsider, like Josie Pickering from Manchester.
We moved around the country a lot, and it always went to a place where I couldn't speak the accent. And so when you went to a new school, the teacher would pick you out to read aloud because you spoke differently. And the kids would all take the mickey then in the school playground. No, you can't speak properly and all that. So I used to say my prayers at night. Please, God, help me to talk like the rest of the kids. And I'd be pronouncing the words like come, fun, don't. But really I was saying come, fun and don't. So then when I'd learnt to speak Southern, blow me down, we came back to Manchester and I spoke differently again. But this time the kids thought I was posh. I used to make this imaginary game up. To me, it was real, it wasn't imaginary then. And I would sit on the outside loo, and I used to think, I'm going to escape one day. And I really thought I could. And I used to pack a few of my favourite toys in this little toy suitcase. I'm really sad when I think of it now. And I had this green umbrella with a duck handle. And this duck looks quite human sort of thing, so I used to talk to it. So I used to say, one of these days, Quacks, because that was his name, we're going to escape. We're going to go on a train to London. And I'd wiggle the umbrella then, so he was answering me. And then I'd make this noise of the train going, my mother used to shout in, what are you doing out there? You've been out there for ages. And you've got jobs to do in here. I have to say, oh, I'm coming now.
Post-war Britain was in a sombre mood. Large swathes of many cities had been seriously damaged or destroyed by enemy bombing. With almost 400,000 deaths during the war, there were few streets and families that did not suffer the loss of a loved one. All this helped shape children's lives and imaginations. When evacuee Marcia Fletcher returned to Manchester, one of the favourite games she played with her friends took place in the local cemetery.
It was nice and quiet there, lots of wild flowers, and we used to look at the statues really, because there were angels and things like that. And we used to sort of get a bit morbid and look for babies' graves, of which there were very many in a Victorian cemetery, often 4 and 5 on the one grave, and then a baby and the mum, or the mum and the baby. And we found this very sad. We used to enjoy the misery of it, you know. We used to look for graves where there were a lot of babies buried, and we'd sort of adopt it. or a grave that was abandoned, that obviously no one had visited for many, many years. And we'd adopt them and have them like our own little private garden. And we put flowers on, a jam jar. There were always jam jars at the cemetery gates where you got water for the flowers. And we might pick a few flowers that had been discarded but were still quite fresh, and some wildflowers we'd put in, and we'd look after these graves. We played in the graveyard, but we did respect it, and we didn't walk on graves. We always made sure we didn't walk on graves.
With the war over, the police could now give their full attention to law and order on the streets, and to catch any gangs of children who dared to defy them. Much street play resumed where it had left off before the war, and if there were minor misdemeanours, they were usually dealt with on the spot by the bobby on the beat. A sharp rebuke, a clip round the ear, or a visit to the child's home usually sufficed. Maurice McGuinness and his friends from Plymouth were known to the local police. They loved scrumping apples from the orchards on the outskirts of the city.
You couldn't get on the wall because they used to put glass, cement glass on top of the wall. But then we'd get a sack, put that on top of the glass and climb the wall, put our hands on top and get the apples. There's about 3 of us. Of course, you fill in all your pullover up and all this. Of course, you get down and you're walking out like this, and the policeman up there, they were policemen, you know, I mean, 6-footers and big blokes. Come here, he would shout. He's not miles away, but quite, of course, you stand still, all these apples. Don't he come? He said, right. And you had to put all the apples down in front of him on the floor. He said, what's your name? And you told him your name, where you lived. No lies. You told him. And he would turn and say, right, I'll be around to see your father.
The policeman was a respected authority figure, and if children got into trouble, their parents knew they had to be seen to uphold the law.
Dad would open the front door. Mr. McGuinness? Yes, Constable, what is it? Your son Maurice, he was scrumpying.
Come on in here, you! I don't know what I'm going to do with him. Get in there, you! Let me get you Get in here, this policeman's going to lock you up. Go on!
In front of the policeman, Father would say, right, bye, upstairs, no tea. You see? Policeman would say, right on, Mr. McGuinness. And, of course, I would go upstairs, police would be gone, Father would come in and say, Maurice, come on down, finish your tea, boy. And that was it, finished.
In the early 1950s, Britain was still struggling to recover from the war, and rationing was still in force. The spirit of make do and mend was embraced by children who made their own toy swords and bows and arrows. The recent victory over Germany boosted the popularity of every kind of war game, and children relived glorious battles from World War II in their imagination. Even greater flights of fantasy could be inspired by discarded objects from the Blitz, as South London girl Jo Roffey discovered.
We used the blackout curtains as a magic carpet. Oh, and I loved it. And my brother, he used to make us dress up so we looked the part, because he said, can't go to Timbuktu looking any old day. He says, you don't know who you might bump into. He used to put my dad's waistcoat on and a tin helmet. And we used to get on this magic carpet and just go all over the place.
In austerity Britain, any child's toy was a luxury, and there was no bigger birthday treat for a working-class girl or boy than a pair of roller skates.
I wanted these roller skates. Well, they were 15 bob, old money. I mean, it's quite a bit of money, 15 shillings. You could do a lot with 15 shillings in them days. But my mum knew I really, really wanted these roller skates. And I woke up on my birthday, there they was, in brown paper, wrapped up in brown paper. Well, I couldn't get them on my feet quick enough. I put them on my feet and I never had them off. Everywhere I went, my mum would say, like, go down the baker's, get a loaf of bread. Woo, used to whiz into the shop. Oh, careful, the woman used to say, coming in here on them. I said, well, I ain't going to be long, I only want a loaf. But I wouldn't take them off. Mum used to worry, oh, be careful how you cross the road on them.
Social class continued to define play in 50s Britain, and there was to be very little social mixing.
If you go down in the woods today, you'd better not go alone.
Middle and upper class children grew up in a closed, chaperoned world where the back garden often marked the boundary of unsupervised play. Friends were vetted, and in well-to-do families, all activities were supervised by nanny. It could be frustrating for more adventurous children, like Stella Sykes.
The only children we really knew were children whose parents were friends of our parents, and we would be taken there, and our nannies would usually be friends, because everybody I grew up with, we all had nannies, all called by the name of the family they worked for, of course, never by their own name. And we would go and have tea with, I don't know, John and Jane with Nanny, and Nanny, their nanny would make an arrangement for them to come back and have tea with us, and then we escaped. We were quite good at escaping the nannies. The one thing we really wanted to do, we loved more than anything, was to go down to Tenterden and play on the recreation ground, which was forbidden because Nanny being sort of the most appalling snob. We weren't allowed to go there because the common children would be playing there. We weren't supposed to mix with rough children. Not her little charges, but of course the only thing we ever wanted to do was to go down there. And for some extraordinary reason, we were allowed to drink Lucasade, but Tizer was forbidden, because that was common, according to Nanny. So the only thing we ever wanted to do was to drink Tizer and meet these rough children, exciting children.
You knew you was late when I shouted you this morning. I've overslept a bit myself. Now look, it's 7:45 by the right time. That clock's not fast this morning, you know.
Most working-class parents with larger families simply wanted to get their children out from under their feet so the day's work could be done. Even in the bomb-damaged cities, there were still enough parks and council playgrounds within walking distance to keep children occupied all day. One of them was Reenie Ranahan from Bristol.
You went out in the morning and you didn't come back till tea time. Your mother used to say, I don't want to see you till tea time. Out, gone. And of course, off we used to go in all winds and weathers to the park with our little fishing net, with our little jam jar, do the fishing, put the little tiddlers in the jar. And then we used to go off then, we used to find the swings and the roundabout. If you were on the swings, if you could go over the bars of the swings, you were brave. And I never, ever. But some of the girls that were ever so brave, they used to let the boys push them and push them up so high that the swings literally went over the top of the bars of the swings. Oh, my heart used to come up in my mouth with fright. I'd say, oh, I could never do that. Don't ask me to do that. I could never do that.
In their search for adventure, gangs of boys discovered new areas to play in, daring each other to take risks to prove themselves. Occasionally, accidents did happen, and tests of courage ended in tears. But the abiding memory is of the freedom and excitement of growing up and learning limits away from adult control. Robert Morris grew up in a village near Leicester.
We had a group of trees in a field below the street where I lived, and they were known as the climbers. And it was a range of trees. So the art was you climb a tree and then you progress across the canopy, as it would now be called, and get down on the far one. If you fell off in between, you went back and started again. One of the boys said, I bet you daren't get on that branch and do like they do in the circus, where you hook your legs over and then you hang upside down off the branch. And I distinctly remember saying, no, I don't think so, because if I fall, I'm probably going to land on my head. And they said, you cowardly custard, you daren't do it. So bravado kicks in, and I picked the branch, got in position, then realised it hurts like hell at the back of your, because you're on a knobbly wooden branch, and I must have tried to shift position, and down I came. But as luck had it, in the process of falling, I did the complete turned and landed on my feet.
Well-to-do girls were carefully protected from any contact with common children in the street. But when they were sent away to boarding school, they discovered that behind its respectable image lay a dormitory subculture every bit as tough. One of those initiated was Stella Sykes.
When I first went to my boarding school, I took Teddy with me because he had been my constant companion, and he was, after all, chief of the toys in the nursery, and we had, when we had the dolls' tea party. One of the girls snatched him and they threw him around the dormitory, and I was backwards and forwards. I was trying to grab him, and one of them got him in with her nail scissors. She cut his nose off, which was really, really upsetting. However, he did get... And actually, I remembered another thing too. They stabbed him. They cut his tummy open to see if I'd got anything hidden inside him, which, of course, I hadn't. I did cry. I remember sobbing my heart out about Teddy, but there wasn't anything I could do. They were all of them. They were bigger, they were older. They knew what was going on. I didn't. So I suppose I just had to kind of be as stoic as I could, but I don't think it was very stoic. I mean, at 8, one isn't really very well equipped to deal with the whole, seemed to me like a mob. It was probably only about 3 or 4 girls, but it seemed like a big mob.
The cinema provided a welcome escape from the harsh realities of life in early 50s Britain. This was the golden age of Saturday morning matinee shows and cinema clubs, with 3/4 of Britain's children attending weekly.
Now, good morning, kids. Welcome to another matinee.
The local cinema was a great meeting place for boys and girls from all over the neighbourhood, and there were plenty of opportunities for wheeling and dealing before the lights went down.
The great collie that you saw in the film, A Mystery in the Mind. Here they come.
This boy said to me, have you got any money? So I said, I've got a penny. Why? He said, do you want to buy something? So I said, what is it? He said, put your hand in my pocket.
Together down.
So my brother was sat next to me at the other side.
Together stand.
I said to him, what shall I do? He said, well, have a look what he's got to sell. So I put my hand in his pocket and it was a white mouse. So I bought it off him for a penny.
The main attraction was usually a cowboy film, hugely popular, especially with the boys. The ritual battle between good and evil, played out by their fantasy heroes, never failed to please. It was a safe place where every boy and girl could let go and create pandemonium in the darkness, often driving cinema managers to distraction. One of the imaginary cowboys was Robert Morris.
We'd got a very strict manager and he wouldn't have any nonsense. So if the kids were bouncing up and down too much, he would come in and say, any more of this, and the film stopped and you're out. And you think, like how we are, we've paid threepence, we're not going to lose this one. So you'd sit like little choir boys through the rest of the field and then explode when you got out. But you were restless. Because you'd seen these cowboys, every kid that came out of that cinema was on horseback, and away you went. All the way down home. Imaginary range, whoa, they're rearing up if a car, which was a rarity, came, whoa, boy, let the car go, and across the road.
This rough and tumble fantasy world of cowboys and Indians was mostly a boy thing. Any girls who wanted to join in had to bargain hard to make sure they didn't end up with the less glamorous roles the boys didn't want to play. But being a baddie could have its advantages.
I said I begged to be a cowboy. Or the Indian chief. So they said, well, you was Indian chief last week, so I'd have to take turns. They were all lads that I played with. And then when I was the cowboy, I was the one that rode into town, the baddie, with me 2 guns, and I was shooting everybody. All these lads had to die then. They were all on the floor rolling about, pretending to be dead. And we have really good times.
Good times for middle-class girls also involved riding, but on a real horse or pony. In the early 50s, pony clubs all over Britain blossomed as parents indulged their daughters' love affair with their very own pony. The girls entered a fantasy world, encouraged by countless adventure books in which they imagined themselves and their ponies to be brave heroines saving the day.
Oh, they were absolutely magical ponies. My second pony, I was told she'd been a circus pony, because if you asked her age, and she was probably about 15 at this point, she would pat the ground 4 times with her paw. I was absolutely convinced that she'd been trained in circus, but I'm sure I was just told this was just a figment of my imagination, but I loved the idea. I got this circus pony. And we were going to travel the world together, and we were going, it was the way you went off into your sort of imagination, you rode, and living on, of course, as we did with plenty of land. I mean, I would go off on my pony, and I was always going to be rescuing people from burning buildings or rescuing them being trapped somewhere. I would be pulling my plucky pony, we'd be pulling the log off, to rescue someone's trapped leg or something.
Unsupervised outdoor play flourished everywhere in the 1950s. Whatever social class they came from, the most popular girls' games conjured up a fairy tale world of handsome princes and wicked witches. And they were usually very inclusive, with each girl taking a turn.
A wicked fairy cast a spell, cast a spell, cast a spell. A wicked fairy cast a spell long, long ago. And then this princess slept for 100 years.
She fell asleep for 100 years, 100 years, 100 years.
It was one of the games where we all did it. Everybody was the princess, and everybody was the wicked fairy, and everybody was the thorns and briars, and everyone was the prince. So you were all, we quite liked that because we were all the same, because sometimes in games where you're picked out, there are often children who aren't picked out, and you can say, dip, 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 my blue ship sailing on, and if you know someone's coming up that you don't like, you can say water instead of water.
This was a unique children's tradition, with strong democratic instincts shared by the boys too.
You definitely had phases. If the majority said, we're off this game, we're on the other, then that's what you went to. Because if you didn't, you just didn't get a game, you weren't invited. So you went with the majority, and once a decision was made, no, we're off Marley's, we're on to Siggy's, or we're on Johnny on the Mopstick, yes! Away you go.
To the children of the early 50s, it seemed as if these would last forever. Patterns of children's outdoor play had survived the disruption of war and had changed little since the first decades of the century.
On the mountain lived a lady, who she is we do not know. All she wants is gold and silver, all she wants is a nice young man. And then they would skip out of the rope, and then the next one would skip in, and then the song would start again. On the mountain.
Eachy peachy pear plum, out goes Tom Thumb. Then you go for it again, eachy peachy pear plum, so it's one up the wall, or you can do one up and one over, or one under your leg. But of course, as soon as you drop the ball, if you drop the ball, you're out, you've got to start again.
But from the mid-50s onwards, children's play would be transformed by a revolution in the British way of life, which brought greater affluence, mass car ownership, and modern housing estates. Each new generation had more of everything, except the freedom to play outdoors. Could children's creative instincts survive and flourish in the modern world? This is the question behind a continuing story of children's play in Britain.
And stay with us, the second part of Hop, Skip and Jump is coming up next.